welcome, guys. Thank you for listening and tuning in to Mahogany Honey Podcast. Woo! Today's topic, I'm so excited about it. We're going to talk about the dangers of censorship, culture, and spirituality. As you guys know, um, I'm big on having empowered women on this platform and uplifting our spirits and bringing those vibes on over to the platform because that's all we're trying to do here at the end of the day. Um, so my guest today is Diamond Delancey. Say hey,
Hello.
girl.
Hi, everybody.
I'm so excited to have Diamond on. Diamond is pretty much part of the Brazen Collective. We had we had the co-founder, another co-founder on there. We had Dareris on. So I appreciate that you guys are. She has a great team. I have to say, like,
Oh,
very lucky to have great people on there and to bring them and pass them down this way because at the end of the day, my heart sits in Miami as well, and I love to support my women out there at the 305. And we're gonna jump right into it. So, um, Diamond has had her. She's gonna give you a guys a, but I want to introduce her properly. Her master's degree in forensic psychology. She is a social justice activist, also the Brazen's chief of organizational and cultural strategist. And here I plan on exploring in detail storytelling journey into your path to becoming a co-founder. And throughout the conversation, we hope to give the listeners and viewers on your resilient journey, so far, and a heavy focus on triumphs and trials to find healing and begin to embrace your current calling. I'm very excited about it because we're going to be talking about social justice, purpose, culture, spirituality, sexual assault, and the harmful things that censorship can do to us as women if we don't open our mouth and speak out. So, without further ado, Diamond, please jump in and tell us more about you.
Well, thank you so much. That was such a great intro. As you said, my name is Diamond, and I am one of the co-founders of the Brazen Collective. The Brazen Collective is a two-part organization. On one part, we are a consulting agency which focuses on diversity and inclusion work for organizations and individuals. And on the other side, we uplift traditionally marginalized voices by sharing their artworks through our creative agency. So I'm so honored to be here. As you said, I have a master's degree in forensic psychology, and that basically just focuses on the criminal justice system and what the implications of criminality are and what that can look like for different communities. So as that relates to my interest as a Black woman, seeing how the new Jim Crow has evolved through mass incarceration, I wanted to take a look at what does it even mean to punish someone and what can that look like restoratively instead of punitively, since our prisons are privately funded and that causes a lot of other issues where it's more like a business, keeping people imprisoned versus actually having them pay retribution for the crimes that they've committed. So yeah, I'm so excited to explore my journey into all of that and talk with everybody about that.
I know. So it everything that you spoke on, it's so and like I really do feel like the people that have come onto the platform, it's been so aligned, just because some of the areas that you have been in and you've navigated, I've navigated myself in the same location in the same city that you have, and so it's almost like you're part of my autobiography, but like at the same time, like it's so unique to have your own story,
Yeah.
come onto the platform and just like literally carry this message. And I'm so interested on how we're going to together weave this story together because we're pretty much weaving spirituality and all these different aspects together. So
Right.
let's jump right into it. Your current spiritual practice and how it influences and it's related to your experiences right now.
Okay, so currently I practice Hoodoo, which is also known as root work or conjure. It's basically African spirituality that was created from our ancestors of the transatlantic slave trade as a way to defy white supremacy and navigate it in a new world. And so, as that relates to me, of course, being a Black queer woman in America with so many different marginalized identities, I've always been met with struggles that I had to overcome, right? And so as it relates to my healing and my journey, I ventured into therapy and things like that, but I always felt like something was missing. And I feel like it's because Black people specifically have always healed communally because we struggled communally. And I was missing that part of my story that needed to be reclaimed that taught me how to navigate white supremacy here. And so it really grounds me and teaches me a lot and builds resilience in me because I feel like a lot of the times Black people, we're so focused on our struggle, right? We're thinking about overcoming obstacles because our ancestors have overcome the biggest obstacle that we could possibly imagine, right? They didn't even want us here and we're here. But on the other hand, there's so much strength and power that we can tap into. And so that's what I really love to see manifest within myself. And I hope that our conversation enlightens like more Black people because I get excited about Black people reclaiming their things and taking it back because this land really loves to criminalize our behavior and then resell it to us and make money off of it. And that's just deeply problematic.
Absolutely. So for those who may not be familiar with Hoodoo,
Right.
um, would you mind elaborating a little bit more on that?
All right. So there's some debate on the origins of hoodoo as it relates like specifically because there is no specific place of origin. So many people debate that our ancestors in West Africa, specifically, when they were brought into the slave trade, they had to disguise their native religion, which from Yoruba influence would be like Ifa and things like that. And as they were transplanted in different areas, they had to disguise this practice into whatever the colonizers form of belief was at the time. So as that relates to like slaves being dropped off in like Haiti and things like that, that has a lot of Catholic influence. So a lot of their deities as it relates to like Haitian Voodoo and Louisiana Voodoo, because there are some slight differences. It just kind of depends on the way that they had to hide their practices. As it relates to Hoodoo, a lot of us were dropped off in South Carolina with the Gullah people and then kind of like made our way down. So since the influence was more Protestant, there weren't any like saints or things to hide these practices in. So most of the slaves at the time hid it within the Bible because the Bible was used as a way to control the slaves at the time. And so our ancestors were like, okay, well, if this tool is being used to control us, it must also and could also be used as a tool to free us. And so as slaves weren't allowed to go to church or like do these things with their slave owners or in these spaces. We were denied medical care and things like that. So our ancestors built this spiritual practice, which is hoodoo, as a way to treat ourselves, build community, and also navigate what was going around. So the formalization of that kind of appeals to like what the Baptist church looks like today. Like a lot of the ways that Black people celebrate or experience Christianity is a lot different than white people. You'll find like in the Baptist church or in a Black church, the spirit or like catching the Holy Ghost, which is kind of like a form of possession and things like that, which would go back to the way that we practiced that was demonized. It's basically, yeah, a spiritual set of practices and beliefs that our ancestors created.
Yeah, listen, please don't, whatever you feel like you need to express and say, and your guidance or your spirit is bringing you into
Right.
is say it.
Yeah.
This is This is not the place for the censorship. This is the place to speak.
It's like, see how ingrained it is, see how ingrained it is. And it's like,
Yeah.
even before I came on to this podcast, I was like sitting with myself at my ancestor altar, and I was like, it's your story. Why are you so nervous to tell your story? And it's kind of just like, it's just been so ingrained in us, specifically like as a Black woman, being told like you could be too loud or too abrasive, or like where even just expressing your opinion could be weaponized by somebody in the room. And it's still something that I am undoing within myself. So yeah, as that relates to hoodoo and things.
And I'm sure that at times too it comes from a protective space
Yeah.
of like trying to no, but really of like also
Yeah.
trying to protect like what you go to, and for people not to like, obviously like attack that or whatever it is. So I completely like understand
No,
the
yeah.
apprehension of it all. Um but I'm so excited because I'm also learning, and I think I told you that
Yeah.
when we first met. I'm like, this is okay. So tell me more about it. And I know you were talking about the herbalism aspect of it, because
Hmm.
we were deciphering the difference between hoodoo versus voodoo, because
Right.
there's a difference.
Right. They both use like some forms of herbalism, and yeah, you will find the differences, and that's why the main difference is Louisiana voodoo and Haitian voodoo. They have a very set of rules, mainly because some most of those practices you can be initiated into, um, and it has a lot of influences. Like I said, they were hiding the original religions within the religions of the colonizers and things like that. So you'll find that a lot of people who practice Haitian voodoo and Louisiana voodoo will worship a lot of Catholic saints. I'm not initiated into those things, so I can't go too into depth, and I don't want to offend anyone because that is not my practice. But hoodoo will vary a lot regionally because, like I said, when it comes to how the slave trade was, a lot of the people who were dropped off in the Americas came from different areas, so they all came with their different knowledge of their herbs from back home. So there is some debate about whether hoodoo has some type of Native American influence, because as we were dropped off here, these are new plants, new herbs that we weren't familiar with. So we did learn a lot from like the Native Americans, but the purposes of the rituals and spells and workings that were made were with the intent to undo the harm of white supremacy. So you'll see a lot of the hoodoo spells or rituals having to do with clearing roads, because a lot of our roads are always blocked by the capitalistic and white supremacist nature of the systems that we're going through. And you'll see a lot of like having herbs for protection. Protection is really big because as a Black person navigating, you are met with so many obstacles structurally, financially, spiritually, physically. So you'll find a lot of like workings to do things like that. Yeah.
See,
So yeah, the general basis is hoodoo. It both of those have to do with the way that our ancestors were colonized at the time. They're both pretty close. I am a firm believer that you cannot practice hoodoo if you are not a Black person, because you don't have that connection or that tied to it. So it is definitely closed. And like when you're talking about gatekeeping and things like that, we were criminalized for these things, especially when the witch hunts happened. This is an easier way to get rid of Black people, by just accusing them of witchcraft and demonizing the things that help them cope. Um, so you'll find that a lot.
no, thank you so much. I think I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I went to New Orleans earlier this
Hmm.
year, and one of the places that I visited was um, the Congo Square.
Hmm.
And it was like there was like a vibe there. There was definitely a
Right.
vibe there because that's where they used to unite
Hmm.
and get together. All the slaves would get together on the only day of rest and pretty much celebrate their culture in that
Right.
space. Um, and there would be like drumming and music, and like a lot of the music that was like cultivated in that
Hmm.
space is very, to my ear, is very recognizable because
Yeah.
that's like the music that also like some of the beats and some of the instruments that they use, we also use in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
So being like Dominican, I'm like,
Right.
this sounds very like I feel a presence of
Yeah.
familiarity in this space. So yeah.
Something about it is very transcendental because music is very important. Music was a way that a lot of the slaves communicated in a way because they didn't speak the same languages at the time, and trying to teach slaves English was like forbidden, obviously. But it does, and going back to Africa, like Ifa and the other African traditional religions, you'll find that dancing and music is very important and a way to communicate with gods and deities. I definitely play music at my ancestor altar. I play gospel music. I'm not Christian, but I play gospel music because my ancestors or my spirits feel connected to it because they were hiding their practices in the church. And a lot of Black people do go to the church as a form of navigating the world around them. So, yeah, it's just, it's so crazy how music can do that.
So I'm so intrigued as to how you were guided towards the major of forensic psychology.
Hmm.
So, did you find any ties to your spirituality, or was this something that you can say, okay, wow, I learned something about myself throughout this process of like exploring this field?
Hmm. That's That's such a good question. I think they aren't directly connected, but they are connected in like how you're saying the storytelling of my life and how I came to be, right? I think being a Black queer person, especially being queer, growing up in a Black family, I always felt disconnected from the religion that my family practiced, which was Baptist Christianity. I'm being taught like who I am isn't acceptable, or the things that I do or may be interested in would cause me to go to hell or things like that. So there was always a disconnect and always a longing and searching for a place to belong. And I think after I went to high school, well, during high school, I was sexually assaulted. So during that experience, I had literally power taken away from me,
Hmm.
a ground shaking power that I didn't know I had at the time, because you're in high school, you're discovering yourself, you're discovering sex, you're discovering who you are, what your ways of communicating are. And I was already so shy to speak and hold power to my voice because I went to a predominantly white high school, and I had to already have that censorship of, oh, you're too white for a Black girl, or you don't speak the way you sound, or questioning intelligence because of where I come from. I'm from Liberty City, born and raised, and I still live here. And that always became a facet of people pointing out how powerless I was. And when it was physically taken from me during the sexual assault, I was like, okay, I my ancestors have gone through so much and so many similar things. Let me look into my heritage and see, like, if I'm not finding relief or community here, maybe I can find it through my bloodline. And I started researching, okay, well, what did I did like a 23andMe test, which isn't 100% accurate. But most of like my DNA results, I was like 90% West African. So I like researched like, okay, what's the predominant religion in West Africa, or what was it at the time? And that's when I came across Ifa. And I was like, okay, well, this doesn't really fit. What about like, and I really thought, I was like, white people will take so much from us and not teach our history. I was like, we had to have something before Christianity, or what did we do? Not everybody could have just acquiesced and taken on this new religion. And that's when I got into learning about Hoodoo and things like that, and how they censored and criminalized our behaviors. And as that translated into here and now, I watched the Khalif Browder documentary, and I always pronounce his last name wrong. I'm so sorry if that is not the correct pronunciation. But I watched a documentary and I saw how this innocent Black man went to prison on Rikers, one of the most notoriously dangerous prisons, where he was physically and emotionally just beaten by this system that he was an innocent bystander, and the effects of that and coming out of Rikers to be claimed innocent years later and then still taking his life because of the detriments of prison, I was like, maybe that's a system I need to look into. So then that's when I came across forensic psychology and trying to understand this system of another form of oppression, because a lot of people like to say racism is over, you're equal now, there was a black president, but they're not understanding the structural underpinnings of what the society does to continue to criminalize black people.
It's a very complex subject, and I want to say, especially in a city like Miami, where culture is cur- constantly
Currency.
rising. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's constantly rising, and I want to say that definitely there's um a very strong, I think you have to like either like live there to fully understand it, but there is definitely a very strong spiritual hold in that area.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
there's a very, and I think there was even an episode on Criminal Minds on the area of
Yeah.
Miami,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of, and even New York too,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of like these are cities where there's a lot of money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money coming in, but then there's a power struggle of like dirty money and like w- abundance, like
Right.
holistic abundance of like what you really is, like these two powers kind of just like interacting constantly with each other. And if
Yeah.
you're caught in the crossfire of it, it could really burn you the wrong way. And like I want to elaborate on this. um and I think I'm gonna probably jump in a little bit here
No, yeah,
and
of course.
share my experience in the criminal justice system as a
Yeah.
court liaison and a child advocate that I was at the time when I was working there. And I always say this, like when you first jump into um these fields, you go in at times blindly and you're still exploring yourself when you're in your 20s. You're like pretty much like, I just want to help. You're coming from an angle of like, I just want to help people, and I see the disparities going on. And like throughout the process, while you're trying to help other people,
Mm-hmm.
this is where the injustice is. You're, as a person that you're being used to assist people, is almost like they're not giving you enough time to explore yourself.
Yeah.
Like, here, go help people, but like don't know who you, but you yet have yet to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know who you are, you can actually do harm in the process of it all,
Yeah.
thinking that you're helping. Because if you don't know your identity and your background and where you come from, and truly, like, yes, racism exists, yes, that the system is corrupt, and that there's definitely um racial systematic oppression going on.
Right.
But it's very it could all be very like subjective if you haven't experienced it,
Mm-hmm.
or gone through a moment of reflection where you go, where in my life,
Yeah.
like, have I seen this and experienced it myself? And how is what the way that I'm going about the work that I'm doing harmful?
Right.
Am I actually being used as a tool to
Yeah.
continue the oppression, or am I being actually effective in dismantling so and uprooting some of these generational traumas, which is supposed to be the purpose
Yeah.
of the criminal justice system at the end of the day? I always considered going to court almost like an intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, this is where your life is going, look at your generational traumas that may be occurring. However, at times I think that where the sin, or we miss the mark, right, where we miss the mark is where pretty much we start treating every case um not on an individual level. Like, we treat them like,
Yeah.
okay, in and out, in and out, like
Mm-hmm.
almost like if it was just like uh a shop,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Because there's like so much in what you just said. And I'm like trying to unpack it all, but there's so much truth to everything that you said, because it's like, yeah, if you don't know who you are, your foundations of like your ethics, your morals are more like they're all flexible because you don't have any boundaries set for yourself. And especially as that relates to hoodoo and the power in that, it was like, who am I as like a black person, as like a member of this community that has had so much power, so much struggle, so much trauma? If I don't know my history or my background or the things that made those people strong, then how would I expect, what is it, and I don't want to mess up the quote because I'm just so like trying to unpack everything, but it's like the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house, right? The tools that they are teaching me can't be the answer, because if their sole purpose is to keep me criminalized, is to keep me marginalized, is to keep me oppressed, why would they teach me how to undo those structures when they're benefiting so much from them? And I definitely connect with the experience of like being a court liaison, because I was actually a CPS investigator in Georgia, and having to see that and seeing the ways in which I'm dealing with a caseload of 40 cases at a time, and I have 30 days to clear 40 cases, but I'm supposed to pay individual attention to each of these families and making sure that the harms and needs are met. But there's only so many hours in a day and so many things that can happen. And I'm also watching that there's so many people on my caseload because you're criminalizing the same people. Whereas I will get a case, and one of the most frequent cases in Georgia would have to do with like lack of supervision, leaving your child home alone for a certain period of time.
Mhm.
90% of those cases on my caseload are poor black families who the mom is working 3 different jobs, 9 to 5. There is like no other parental figure in the house, or the dad's working 9 to 5 jobs and there is no other figure in the house, parental figure in the house. And so who's going to watch the kids? If I have to work to provide for my family, who's going to watch the kids? And I'm being criminalized for that because you're not giving me any community resources to address that. Whereas if I'm in a suburban neighborhood and I get a lack of supervision charge, it's treated differently. It's not, oh, that parent doesn't care about their kids. They're out doing God knows what, leaving their kid alone in this dangerous environment. Then it becomes, oh no, that's understandable. Or like the stand, I don't know how to specifically explain it also without getting into people's specific cases, but you'll see the way that they treat communities of color differently than white families who will come across for the same charges.
I think the biggest part where I started having an awakening was when I
Yeah.
started working in the human trafficking court system.
Mm,
Um, more, and I really did not want to work there. Like my spirit was just like, this is I was working more in the unified family court setting. So most of
mhm,
my cases were unified family court, which is like divorce or just a case coming in for domestic violence cases and things of that nature, or just like
right.
more so for custody. Um, and something happened. There was like a shift, and I swear to you, I think all of it, like looking
Yeah.
back to it, I really feel like God was like orchestrating my awakening, and
Mhm.
he like placed me in. I was covering because this girl had left for maternity leave, and
Right.
I started covering her cases in the human trafficking court. And I would observe the judge. I would observe the like the clients coming in, like
Right.
the from the cases, and I would observe like the attorneys that were handling the case. And I was just like, no one was, I always felt like no one was fully present.
Mhm.
Like when they were like, it was almost like, okay, next case, what's the status on this case? Like, and I would have to, as a court liaison, obviously like give some detail about like the case and what was
Right.
going on and the services that they were being provided and so forth at the time. And it felt very like, okay, next.
Yeah.
Um, and throughout like my like me sitting there, I almost like had this epiphany, like coming in and being like, what if, and I hate to like really think this way, but what if this is a monitoring system? If
Mhm.
this is just monitoring and pretty much making sure that, like a moderator of like
Mhm.
ensuring that the human trafficking doesn't get so much out of hand, where um people with money actually like start being like unmasked and pulling the
Mhm.
veil behind them of
Mhm.
like, whoa, 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 like we have to ensure that it's only the low income individuals who are doing this to each other, and that we don't have a hand in this. And it was almost like you're gatekeeping, as in a as like you're
Yeah.
sitting in a position of power as a judge, and you're sitting in these positions, and it's almost like you're ensuring that your people don't get in trouble,
Yeah.
and that they're monetizing off of this, you're
Hmm.
monitoring this.
Hmm.
And these are real people that are going through cases, and this is really affecting their lives.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was very performative at times.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like the concern and the care was very performative. And I think that's the one of the uh like faults, one of the struggles of sexual
Right.
assault survivors,
Yeah.
is that there's a lot of lack of a, and I don't think that the lack of awareness is there at times um by accident. I think
Yeah.
it's there sometimes on purpose,
It's
because there
intentional.
is some awareness
No, it's 100%
of,
intentional.
but like an awareness of like, we have to ensure that we keep things this way and that way, but you can't look this way. We can't have you look, because God forbid you look this way, I don't get to sit in this chair, and I don't get the money that the city and the revenue and my
Yeah.
friends need to make sure that I have their back.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm having goosebumps right now.
No, of course,
I'm
because it's a
having
traumatic experience. It really is. It's a lot of power and control. And like you said, a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of making sure I can keep certain people oppressed while I continue to grow from my privilege. Because God forbid that we all grow into a place where we can all be sustainable and create generational wealth. It was happening on the other side of CPS too, where, like you're saying, it becomes a monitoring system where if I keep giving these poor black families CPS history, because that's what they're constantly building every time this person comes in. Lack of supervision. Oh, you left your child alone while you were at work. Okay, I still got to go to work tomorrow. So now I'm going to get another CPS case. So now my like track record is building and I'm looking like this terrible, awful parent when it was never solved. You never solved the issue in the first place. Okay, what are the resources so that I don't have to do this? Where are the resources for supplemental daycare? Where are all of these things? Whereas like these richer, more affluent neighborhoods, their taxes are going to their school. So they have all these after school programs, all these other things to make sure that their kids don't end up like the inner city kids. And so it just, it's mind boggling. It's mind boggling and it's disheartening because as a person of color, you're in the system and you're watching it and you're, like you said earlier, am I participating in the oppression? Because I have to do my work and I have to, follow up on these things, or am I dismantling? Because we always like to think that we can change things from the inside, right? Like, yes, this is a super racist, classist organization, but when they see me and they see the work that I can do, they will change and then it'll funnel out. But sometimes a shitty system, I'm sorry, can we?
No, yes, you can
Okay,
share.
I think can we
Yeah,
go?
yeah.
Sometimes a shitty system is a shitty system, and if the purpose of it is to keep you oppressed, it's not going to change.
And
Get our own
and
systems.
and as someone who's working these cases, at times, like, you get so discouraged because, for one, you see that you feel like your client is not changing, like your case, the people on your case are just not,
Right.
some of the
Not
parents are
change.
not understanding, they're not comprehending like what's going on. And it's like you have your views of like what you have to do in order for this case to succeed, and for, let's say, for them to have a great, to have a better outcome.
Right.
But then they have their circumstances and their situation that they're going through, and it's like almost like you can't see from both sides of like
Mhm.
the spectrum, because it's like I'm sitting on this side, and then you start getting discouraged because you're like, nothing is changing here.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I feel like, because of the censorship that goes on, and I think um at that time I was becoming so awake that, like, it was really harping at my soul, to the
Yeah.
point that I had to like, um I was burning out, like my soul was
Yeah.
like going. And I say this to a lot of people, like I have had to go to therapy for this because I've literally felt like a reality that was just immensely like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I was part of this. And I think there was a lot of guilt too on my
Yeah.
end because I really thought I was helping and then started realizing that I may have been actually contributing to it continuing and things not changing. And so
Yeah.
when I started becoming a rebel and starting to be more outspoken, I started getting more in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was very upset at times with my coworkers at the time because I was like, you guys, they were like, yeah, girl, we've been knowing. But we need a check. We need to like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was just like, in my spirit just would not, it would not sit right. And then it
Right.
was just like when they started disregarding what I had to say about the oppression that was going on, and I started going on the other side of things, like, hey, I think that that's actually like there's some corruption maybe, like,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And I started like questioning things about the
Yeah.
agencies and organizations and how we were handling things. um it's when I was like disregarded. I was like many times disregarded and neglected and being like, yeah, yeah, we'll handle it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like we'll make sure to like go over that case again or whatever. And it's like that's where you start getting burnt out and
Yeah.
discouraged as a worker because you feel like I'm being used
You
as a
are.
person of color. I'm
Mm-hmm.
being used as a person of color to almost recruit
No.
people
Yeah.
with
It
them.
it's it's so much. My like turning point was, and this is all to say, yes, you will have to go to therapy if you do that type of work because they are not going to do it for you because they expect you to still be a cog in the machine and bounce back from the trauma that you're experiencing by watching a trauma happen to someone else. No, you have to come back. There's 40 cases. Somebody has to do it. I had a child death case. And it wasn't the mother's fault. The child died as a result of an infection that happened. This mother like worked fast food, nine to like paycheck to paycheck, and has to bury her son that she can't afford a burial for. Where my agency is like, okay, well, her son died an hour ago, go question her. I had to question this
That
woman, this
happens.
black woman,
That
while her
happens.
son just died an hour ago in the hospital, where she's just trying to conceptualize how what is happening, dealing with the grief of losing a child suddenly, and then how am I going to pay for this? Because at the end of the day, someone still has to pay for it. And they use you because they want to look diverse. And this goes back to like Brazen work too. They want to look diverse. They want to look like they are representing the people that they serve, but they'll just use you as a way to push their still racist agenda to accomplish a means to a goal. And it's like, well, you're helping, right? Because if, and then you feel like if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? Because at least I am a person of color who understands, and I won't come into this space trying to criminalize you even more because I understand the systems that you're working against. So it's like a tug and pull of like, what can you do and how can you do it and how can you show up? It's hard.
No, it definitely is. And I had so many moments where I started questioning myself,
Yeah.
and I started realizing that um like spirit, whatever the my higher self was seeking,
Yeah.
and was like, girl, the best way to create change is honestly to change and work on yourself and figure out
Mm.
who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I think once you do that, you'll probably be more impactful
Mm-hmm.
versus like over here running yourself dry with like
Mm-hmm.
cases and cases and cases where you're not even giving them the individual attention that you
Yeah.
wish that you could give them.
Yeah.
um
I think Hoodoo definitely did that for me in that exact same way. Like I became, like I said, questioning what tools do I have to combat this? Or, and I got the same message too, work on yourself, build your power in yourself, and rely on the community that you do have. And so like I just sit sometimes, I sit at my ancestor altar. I'm like, okay, I don't know. This is a lesson, right? It just helps me deal with the adversities that I'm facing. This is a lesson. What do you want me to learn? And can I learn it gently and graciously? Because I'm so tired of learning through trauma and hurt. And we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. But because you also go into these spaces of like trying to find your voice because you are so censored in these spaces, especially in Miami nonprofit spaces. I had to leave that space too because it's like these organizations are built to combat these oppressions and uplift these people, but then will still do harmful practices, silence the people of color in their spaces by saying they don't have the agency or authority as the white people that they bring in. They don't value like personal lived experiences over credentials from someone who will never understand like what happens to these people that they are supposed to be helping. So I think just building that groundedness in myself and having the mindset of my ancestors aren't going to let me fail. There's too much of my ancestors' blood in this land for me to like not do well. They've survived so much so that I can be here. And so I just have to remember my purpose. And instead of trying to change their systems, I'm just going to create my own because my people have the knowledge to do that and they have done that before. So we can do it again.
Yeah, and for me, my journey was once I left that space of um like working in the criminal justice field, I my soul wanted art so bad. I just wanted
Yeah.
art.
Yeah.
And I started working at art organizations,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt myself coming back to myself in these
Yeah.
creative spaces. Um but at the same time, because I was already so aware, I started
Yeah.
to see the oppression in those institutions as
You're
well
gonna see it
too.
everywhere. It's so deeply embedded. You're gonna see it everywhere. What was the person who was like to be woke in America is to be constantly enraged because you'll see that every single thing is systematically built and stacked against you. But you have to we can do it together. We can do it through resilience and community building and breaking down those walls and sharing our stories and especially sharing vulnerability with each other because I feel like there's also especially along amongst black women there's like that superwoman complex, like the black woman superhero complex of black women are so strong, they can take anything, they can handle anything, they can turn nothing into gold. But that also builds this narrative or a counter narrative that black women don't need healing, black women don't need space, black women don't need softness. And you do.
Yeah. Especially when you're trying to help other people. I spoke on this on my previous episodes
No, you're good.
where like, you know, where is your softness? Where is your feminine energy? Like I can't feel it because it's been so um whitewashed with the
Yeah.
patriarchal system of like
Yeah.
conducting things in such a masculine way of like
Yeah.
do execute, um like succeed,
Yeah.
go. And like don't those feelings, you can't we feelings are not allowed in a work setting. Like you need to like put your feelings aside
Mhm.
and do your work.
I also feel that for like as a survivor of sexual assault too, where it's like because this thing happened to me, my initial response was to be super guarded and angry and just like I let my power leave me once. I can't let anybody in to do it again. But that's also hurtful for me. Like, where's my growth and evolution from that if I stunt myself after this experience? If I let this one man change my life when he probably doesn't even think he did anything wrong because the way that we treat women in this society is like just as disposable or as just objects to be desired and wanted by men. But being a sexual assault survivor has also made me do a lot of inner child work, to be like, okay, I need to heal that girl from high school who was severely taken advantage of. Who can I be for that girl? Like, what did she need at that time? And that's how I kind of try to build resilience in myself through that type of work to build that softness in me. So
No, that's amazing. That you more so than anything were able to come out on the other side of this. And
yeah, everybody can, and I don't want to build a facade as if like I'm out, right? Because there's so many systems, right? I'm still struggling, but I'm leaning into my power and accepting that struggle is a part of life. But I have the tools to build a new reality. I have the means and the creativity to build a new reality, just like my ancestors did. And leaning in on that has been challenging and also rewarding, right? Because you also, Hoodoo was passed on orally because, you know, we weren't taught to like read and write here, especially in the language that would be universally communicated, and also to protect it and keep it away from certain people. So I also still come into this space, even though I know this is a space I belong, it's a space that I was called to. I still have this question of, am I doing it right?
mm,
Like, because there isn't like a structure, like there's no
a
Hoodoo
blueprint.
church that I can go to, you know. And it teaches community in the sense that, like, if you ask your grandparents or your great grandparents different things, you'll notice that Hoodoo has always been a part of like our cultural things, like walking in backwards sometimes, or like this, there's this one I told my sister, I think I like I swept the broom on her foot, and she was like, "Oh, you need to spit on the broom." And I was like, "Where did you get that from?" She was like, "I don't know. Somebody told me." And I was like, "That was an old Hoodoo thing." Like certain things that we do. So just reclaiming that and doing that has been, like I said, challenging, but fiercely rewarding.
Yeah, I the interesting part is that um for us, this generation of us like trying to seek our like our background of like
Yeah.
and our roots, and almost like our family at times gatekeeping us
Mm-hmm.
from our own
Mm-hmm.
like history,
Mm-hmm.
because it also occurs in my family as well, where it's like shunned upon. I mean, we're practicing Christians in my
Mm-hmm.
household,
Right.
and we acknowledge that, and that's like who we abide by. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I want to know. And my great grandmother, I was told stories of, and like, but when they're said, they're in a shameful way,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, you don't know like
Yeah.
what led to that, or
Right.
why it was needed, or
Yeah.
why, how what she was practicing or going about
Yeah.
whatever it was that she was doing, especially during oppressive times in the Caribbean, in
Yeah.
Dominican Republic, where we were the first
Mm-hmm.
country ever to be colonized.
Yes. Yes.
Our country was the first country to ever experience colonization. And so I can we have so much history of probably African like
Yeah.
practices that I'm not even familiar with.
Yeah.
And it, and I'm very sad about it, but I'm
Yeah.
also feel that the presence of something guiding me too at the same time, of like you'll find
Yeah.
a way to
Yeah.
find what
What resonates with you
and who you are.
and who you are. No, yeah, of course, they're, especially because you're so close to Haiti, the first country to gain independence through a revolt of the slaves, like, you know, and a lot of that, rumored to be a lot of Hoodoo, not Hoodoo, I'm sorry, a lot of Haitian Vaudois influenced in that too, or Hudu too sometimes. And a lot of like the slave revolts here were rumored to have like Hudu influences of like High John the Conqueror, like carry like dying after being massacred after trying to run away, and his blood going into an herb like the High John the Conqueror root, and that his blood and his spirit embodied the tenacity to overcome white supremacy and holding that. A lot of Hoodoo practices are stemmed in the ways that slaves used what they could to dismantle a system. And you also have to, there's a lot of unlearning that has to take place, right? Like, of course it looks that way, and it's hard for our families now to think about these things because it's been so ingrained in them that these things were wrong, these things are terrible. And it's like, how could seeking healing for your community when no one else was going to give it to you terrible? If I had like a cut in my leg as a slave, and I can't seek medical treatment, but I'm going to go to a root doctor and they're going to slice a bird, put it on my leg, wrap it up. And yeah, that looks weird. That looks crazy. But the decaying animal produces maggots, and the maggots are helping to cleanse the wounds. Just because it's not white or polished in the way that white people want it to be doesn't make it less than or not worth anything. They've done that with everything that we've done. Like when it comes to the stereotype of Black people eating watermelon, and that was because like back in the times, like Black people sold watermelons, and it was like white people were like, ew, why would I buy watermelons? That's what like Black people eat. And it becomes a stereotype of, now it's cultural, like, you know, and they use it in images. Like the simple thing of Black people finding a way to make a source of income now becomes an object of mockery in your minstrel shows with like Black people eating, well, white people cloaked in dark Black makeup, eating watermelons and doing these different things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you just brought me to a question that I just remembered of
Yeah.
like cultural appropriation and how now it's like the popular thing to buy crystals and buy all these metaphysical, it's like a metaphysical trend going on,
Yeah,
right?
it
And this
is.
is,
It is.
and when you go into these spaces to, for example, like um find some type of holistic healing um like things,
Practice. Yeah.
um I want to hear your, like most of the time when I, especially here in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
like when I go to a metaphysical store, usually the people are white who
Mm-hmm.
own the shop,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a history of like their own um practices with like
Yeah.
witchcraft and all these other things and whatnot. But at the same time, um I want to know what your idea is, or your thought
Mm-hmm.
or your views are on the metaphysical trend,
Right.
and is it harmful to the culture? Like, for example, can we consider it a form
Yeah.
of exploitation to a point?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where does it cross the line?
Right. So many points. And I hope I touch them all, and I hope they don't leave my mind. Um, so the first thing, my holistic answer is it's helpful and it's harmful, right? Because like we were talking about earlier, this was like an oral, as it relates to Hoodoo, this was an oral tradition. And if your own family's gatekeeping and won't, you know, give you the information out of fear of being exploited or out of not unlearning and unpackaging their own ideas of what the practice is objectively, where would you go for information, right? You sometimes you can trust a book, but is it being marketed to you? Like, who is the author? Who did they learn from? What's their ancestral heritage? What's their culture? What's their tie? What's their motivation for making this item, this product? So it does get hard in trying to navigate authentic sources from exploitative sources, but I do admire the trend. Like, I love it, like, because like I said, it's I won't lie and say that I don't learn things off of TikTok or Instagram, or like, for Instagram, Millennial Soul Food's a super good like Instagram account. Juju Bay, who runs a little Juju podcast, is like super informational. But I just like I do my extra work to vet the resources that I'm given. And as it relates to Hoodoo specifically, I'm like, is this person Black? Is this person of like African ancestry? Okay, where did they learn it from? Comparing notes. Are they out for any, do they seem like they're out for an exploitive like type of thing? When I like do their things or receive their messages, is it resonating with me? Because your spirit's gonna tell you. You know, you get that like intuition, like, I don't know about that. Maybe I need to double check that. But it's also historical in the sense that when the slaves were practicing and doing it, it was demonized and criminalized, and you couldn't do it. But I think, and I don't quote me on this, I think around like World War I, you started to see people start to try to monetize these practices because they work. They were a system that worked for people. So slave owners would see their slaves doing certain things or hear about a root doctor doing this, and they're like, well, these slaves can't make a business out of this, they can't make money out of this, so I have the privilege, I have the resources, so let me do it, and I'm going to make money off of them, because that's what they've always been doing, making money off of our labor and reselling it as their own, which is hard. I would say, as it relates to like balancing appropriation and exploitation, I can only really speak about like Hoodoo, because I don't want to speak for any other practice or like how they feel about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I'm trying to like wrap it up. Do your research. Do your research. There's like really good books, really authentic sources. Zora Neale Hurston wrote a whole book about Hoodoo in America. So, start to like do those things and it'll come. Sit with your ancestors, sit with your guides. I feel like just the intent of like wanting to learn more and do more will lead you in the right direction, with the caveat that Hoodoo is only for Black people, period.
Right. And what I want to say and add to this, especially for people who are like a bit younger and are probably, or even now, I want to say, I think this applies to anyone who is like soul searching and trying to do like ancestral like
Mhm.
background research and work. Um, at times it's so funny. I think of Candyman the movie. I no, and I'll tell you why I think of
Yeah.
Candyman the movie. I think of Candyman the movie because at times when you don't know and you've been um like I guess like censored or just like stopped from exploring who you
Yeah.
past, you're gonna what do kids do? What do people
Mhm.
do in nature when you tell them they can't do something?
Mhm.
They want to know even more. They want to
Mhm.
actually explore it even more. And at times when you have no guidance and you're going into
Right.
spiritual spaces,
Mhm.
you might find yourself in a really space
Yeah.
that you did not belong
Yeah.
and might actually start seeing some stuff because I really do believe that
Yeah.
um there's some good things like spirituality could be used for great things in order
Mhm.
to just like be one with yourself and uplift you and guide you and do all these great things, but at the same time you can find yourself in a space where you might be trying to manipulate situations and you're going against like your own
Yeah.
like destiny,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're over here manipulating things
Mhm.
and you might actually end up harming yourself or harming
Mhm.
others in the process,
Mhm.
and because you're going in with such a forceful nature.
Yeah.
And so I definitely wanted to put that out there to please like if
Yeah.
you are doing any investigative work or like trying to find your
Mhm.
spirituality and where you
Mhm.
belong, to also be mindful of like who's guiding you, because I'm sure you
Yeah.
can maybe speak on certain experiences where you were like, I
Yeah.
don't know if this is for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you had an experience like that where you were like, I
I
don't know if I
definitely have. No, I definitely have. There's so many things. Yeah. I was the laugh for Candyman was like out of like nostalgia, because I bring up that movie to certain people and they're like, what the heck are you talking about? They don't understand it.
the
So that was
90s
like,
baby thing.
yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, she said this movie. Um, but yeah, there are a lot of dangerous things, and it definitely does happen. There is like a lot of TikTok trends where you'll see they'll be like, stand in the mirror and do this 3 times. Don't do nothing without no explanation. Like, you need be like, okay, why do you want me to do that? What is that? Like, I think it does have to have like a level of intuition. My other second caveat, and this might be like a controversial caveat, but I try not to dip into things that aren't my things. So it's like when people are like, oh, I want to get into witchcraft, oh, I want to get into this, let me go, fucking like the crystals for a thing. I have some crystals, but like people, their first thing will be, or tarot. That's a good example. They'll go straight to tarot. And it's like, okay, but why jump into something that you just saw trendy? Why not? If you want to be rooted in magic, don't you think your magic would be stronger if it actually came from your people? that's like to say, like, why would you go somewhere else when your people probably have something that's in existence that works for you? So for me, that's always like my thing. I try not to delve into stuff that's not my stuff. And I think like intent's always important, right? Like when it comes to hoodoo, there's so many different ways to do a spell, to do a ritual. Not one way is like the best way. Your own magic, your own spice is what gives your workings magic. So if, but you also, intent is like number one. Don't be going into this stuff just to be hurting other people, and you probably won't find yourself messed up. Like if you're focusing on protection or self-growth on yourself, you're not going to be delving into stuff that could get you out here messed up, because people really do got spirits out here and they might be stronger than yours. So you need to watch out. Don't be messing with other people. Mind your business. Unless they are advertently like affecting you direct, like, you know, hurting you, find another way to deal with it. But like I said, going back to intuition when it comes to like finding the wrong people, there's a lot of like stuff of like babalaos, which are like Ifa priests, male priests, who will be like in your DMs. Don't go get no spiritual reading from some man who popped up in your DMs like, hey, I got this going on. No, thank you. I will find my own teacher. I'll find my own ways. I have tried, because like I said, Hoodoo wasn't my first stop, it's my last stop. I probably shouldn't even say last stop, but it's my current stop. I was first interested in Ifa, and I was like looking for different ilays. Ilay means house. That's kind of like the term for like, I guess, like a church or a group of people who practice this thing under one person, who is the leader who teaches them different things. And the vibe was off. But because I was so desperate for trying to make this work, I kept
Mm.
ignoring my intuitions, my signs that were like, I don't know about that. But then I would be like, but they seem like nice people and I need this information. Who else is going to give this information to me? They're right here. I had to tell myself, well, my spirits had to tell me, if we want you to have the information, you're going to get it. Don't force it. So I, without going into depth of like different things like that, you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of grief if you don't rush things. And it shouldn't be something that's rushed, because the biggest part of hoodoo is ancestral veneration, building that connection with your ancestors. And you don't build no relationship overnight. You don't come in here like, oh, I want to do this so that tomorrow I can do a fast luck spell and win the lotto and I'll be good. No, it takes work. It's a practice, which means the more you practice, the more it'll make sense and you know, gel together and get you on your path. It's like, it's more of the journey that's important. And for me, that's been the thing. I started with hoodoo with just on my altar a glass of water, a white candle, and some names of my ancestors who have passed. And I would just sit at my altar and just be like, okay, this is how I'm starting. Start low, go slow, but like, this is how I'm starting. If I want to build a connection with my ancestors, I'm going to sit here with them. I'm going to talk with them. I'm going to make this something that I can get into. And then I'm going to, you know, dip my feet into something more as things start to come into my path and I feel it align. I'm going to explore this a little bit. But the minute it feel off, find something else.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I just thought of something too. Like when I was working, and when I was working at in the court system in Miami,
Yeah.
um, I used to have a lot of also angry like I remember this one case, but this lady she was really off. Like she
Yeah.
did not mean well. She was actually trying to human traffic children, and she was yeah, she was a foster care. The
Oh,
kids are safe now because I ended up my intuition guided
mm,
me through this process of like, you're not crazy. This woman is definitely trying to is a faking herself as a foster parent, but in reality she's like trying to traffic
yeah.
kids when first of all she was pimping the mom to begin with. But I digress. This is a true story, by the way. I actually had
Yeah.
people to back me up on this. um, she told me she was going to curse me. Like she's like, I'm going to place a hex on you. And I was in the back of my head, I was a little bit nervous, but then I spoke with my grandmother. My grandmother's a practicing Christian,
Hmm.
but my grandfather was a shaman at some point in his life.
Hmm.
And I was like, lady, if you only knew, I have both sides on my side, so you go ahead and
You
try
don't
that.
know who you don't know who you messing with out
Because
here.
you
You
don't
don't.
know. I was like, go ahead, sis. You do that.
Go off.
Go off. I was like,
Go off.
I may look commercial to you because I'm dressed up in court clothes and
Hmm.
whatnot, but don't get it twisted. Like,
People be out here wild. They really be out here wild. But yeah, I think, and like, because Miami has such also like Santeria influence, you'll like people, things will happen like that a lot here sometimes in a sense. Or I know I have like these experiences of like people not recognizing who you are or what you do. I walked into a botanica, which is like a place where you get herbs and things like that. In Miami, most of the people who work there are Spanish because Botanica is in Spanish. But they have like other variations of it. But I walked in there and I had a Ifa divination, which told me that my head was owned by Yemoya, which is a African Orisha that's getting into like Ifa things. But basically, I had a reading and was told that there was a deity specifically assigned like to me to protect me that I was supposed to work with. I went to the Botanica and I was like, hey, how much is this Yemoya statue? Oh, $500. I was like, what? I was like, what? I was like, no. But it was like a gatekeeping tactic to be like, why you want that? Are you coming in here to be like exploitive? Yeah, you just want to take this pretty little thing. Well, then I'm going to charge you this. And I was like, no, I actually have like, I have to like, credential myself a little bit and be like, this is that. And they're like, oh, okay, then like, okay, this will work. But it's just on both ends of like people trying to find information, people trying to like learn their own practices, or also just being out here coming across people who practice who may like have ill will towards you and just be out here trying to hex you. Everything's dangerous. Stay cautious.
yeah, I just, in my heart, I definitely pray for everyone who is in a space where they're doing self exploration, and I
Yeah.
really hope that they find their divine guidance and light to
Yeah.
guide them into what they're really trying to do, which is like just really getting to find out like who they are and just like find their purpose and be of service,
Yeah.
in whatever way and whatever practice they find that in.
Yeah, and don't let social media fool you. Like a lot of people will think that the most powerful people have 100 candles, 100 crystals, 100 this, 100 that, 100,000 followers on Instagram. That don't make their magic or their power more special than yours. And like that's like important to note, because I feel like in that desperation of people searching and exploring, they are also chasing an image of what's portrayed to them. And you have to get back to your roots and think like, were my slave ancestors really out here with 100 candles doing all of this stuff, 100 crystals? Does that mean their magic didn't work? It had to, because I'm here. So I also want to offer that caveat. Don't think that spirituality has to look one way, and that comes with like censorship or anything that you do. What's for you is for you and will always be for you. Nobody, no, even if two people are doing the same thing. Like if you had like a best friend who podcasted too, cool, that's great. Y'all both gonna succeed because y'all both different people. Y'all both have different magic. Y'all both have different spice. Everybody can eat out here. And nobody's gonna do it the way that you're gonna do it. So believe in yourself, show up for yourself truly and fully, and be grounded in that.
Absolutely. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel like a
No.
part of me that I've always wanted to discuss and never had like the way to do it, like the right person. I haven't had met the right person to
Yeah.
have had the discussion to, bring this information to the table, because I do think it's extremely relevant,
Yeah.
um like across times, not just for now, but like I think this is a generational conversation. This
It
is a
is.
classic conversation.
It is, and it's so magical to see how it's coming and showing up at this time. Because like even when protesters were out in Ferguson, people were drawing sigils for them, which are like spiritual, I don't want to say this in the wrong way, but drawings or like symbols to protect. And so like the Ferguson protesters were wearing that. Out in like Chicago, or no, Baltimore. In Baltimore, there's this one woman, and I forget her name, but every time somebody's killed on her block in Baltimore, she holds a space for them with like sage, and really brings the spirit back, because she's like, we're so violently killed sometimes, or when you're violently killed in that way, there's no rest for your spirit. And
Mm.
how like people grieve you in such a violent way, and sometimes that's all that the memory is of you, is of grief and suffering, and no one took the time to uplift you or uplift that spirit or uplift that person. And that's become like a whole movement in Baltimore where people are getting in tune. I think as we're seeing more of the suffering of Black people in such a televised way, where our trauma is literally on display 24/7 in a manner that it hasn't been ever, because now it's like, I back with at like the heart or like the start of Black Lives Matter, it was just like back to back every week you were seeing some Black body die. Like when Philando Castile's video was like just showing up all the time, I was just sick. Like, and I was just like, how are we even expected to go on normally without having a way to deal with these things? And Hoodoo has been that for me. And so I am thankful that other people are experiencing it and reclaiming our generational knowledge and ancestral like wisdom of ways of coping and surviving. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I'm just happy that we're exploring other ways outside of the ways that white people have taught us to cope and survive. And I'm
Ab-
happy for that.
Absolutely. Any suggestions or takeaways? Think I like I want to definitely let the viewers know, like, where are you now in your journey before we like close
Yeah,
off?
no worries. So I'm still figuring my journey out. I am still on the path, and I just turned 26. I hate to say that, but I feel so and I just come to a point in my life where I was like, it's time to step into your power. It's time to do the things that you want to do. Maybe you're not finding a space in these organizations or these jobs or these what occupations because what's for you hasn't been built yet, and maybe you need to step out and create what you're looking for. Like, why would I constantly be trying to make these systems work for me and not believe in myself or uplift my power to create something and try? I think I had the notion that there were people out there that were fearless, that who just, and I wasn't that person. I live in a constant state of anxiety due to like mental illness things. But I was like, no, I can never do that. I'm not fearless like that person. I'm not confident like that person. Forgetting that that person's scared too. But the difference between me and that person is that they're scared and still doing it. I'm scared and just sitting in my scaredness. So you had a conversation with Yada Elise previously on the podcast. So Yada Elise is the CEO. She came to me with this idea of Brazen, and I just instantly felt like a soul connection. Like something was like, this is it. This is a way for you to talk like to walk how you were talking. Like, you said you wanted to build something. This is what like aligns with everything you've been doing. You were a spoken word artist, so you value art, you value the freedom of expression. You're a Black queer woman who has been censored out of spaces, so of course you would want to build a space that uplifts these voices that have been shut out, that have had these experiences. You've worked at shitty organizations that just pushed labor out of you and didn't care about you, and now you have this opportunity to build something with women who truly care what you have to say. And you have the authority, not that we need white man's paperwork all the time, but it's your LLC. So you have the authority to, push your visions without pushback that's coming from a harmful place. Like, I'm not going to say that everything we do at Brazen is like 100% agreed on, but we really do it horizontally, where there is, even though Yadi's CEO, we both have the same decision-making power. And so we really sit down and decolonize and destructure what a professional company will look like, in the sense of like, it's 100% important for us to be authentic and fully ourselves. And we go back to that. And as the like chief organizational and cultural strategist, that's like my whole job, is to make sure that we are centered internally in what we are talking about and believe in, and also externally in creating a culture for the people who decide to join our movement. So right now in my journey, I am leaning into my power that I firmly believe my ancestors have implanted with me. I'm moving forward with that power, with their divine protection that constantly covers me, because I have a army of warriors who have come before me and have navigated this space beautifully. And I'm moving forward with that to create a space for other people to do the same. Maybe not through Hoodoo specifically, but in trying to find them themselves, reclaim that power, and manifest that into this world.
I think you guys are doing amazing work for being
Oh.
so young,
Yeah.
like finding
Couple months.
yourselves. No, I really do. I wish that I would have like found a tribe that I could have started, you know, a company or like an organization or something that was like a purpose for. So this is amazing that you guys have, found your calling early on and you guys are doing it together. I think it's beautiful.
Oh,
And I have to thank whoever sent you guys my way. And I think it was Whitney. I
it's
can't say her
Whitney.
name.
She has it.
I'm
Yeah.
Whitney's like the my ghost PR that I don't know of. Like tell Whitney to show face. I want to meet
She's
Whitney.
coming on the podcast too.
I need
But
Whitney to come on down, girl. Think like she's wow. Like thank you, Whitney. Like I said it before, but I can't say it enough. Like who
I'll
is
tell
this
you.
mystery woman? Like
She's my sorority sister, and it's so funny, all of this coming into culmination, because one of our so I'm sorority sisters with Yeletis and Whitney, and we're in Theta Nu Xi Multicultural Sorority Incorporated. And one of our sorority sisters is a founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, Opal Tometi. So when I found that out in like when was I at UF? Like 2014, 2015. They're like, did y'all know Opal's our sorority sister? And I was like, let me reach out to her. And I literally found her on Facebook, messaged her, and I was like, yo, you're my sorority sister. I'm in charge of Pride Awareness Month at UF, and I want to really bring like a Black Lives Matter co-founder here. Like, can you help me? Can you help me? And she was like, well, I'm not queer, so I can't. I feel wrong taking that space, but let me point you in the direction of another co-founder. So I feel like everything is just so universal. Finding your people will come, and you'll be led in ways that will move you. And I don't want you to diminish what you're doing, because this is powerful in and of yourself. It is so brave of you to create, like to move forward and be like, I'm gonna podcast, this is what I'm gonna do because this is important to me. And that takes courage to do, and it's important work. Like, this is important, and I thank you, because this is my first podcast ever. So I thank you for opening doors.
no, no. I really just for me, I can't explain it because it's one of those feelings of like I just want to make sure that people are okay who have gone through like what I've been through and don't pigeonhole themselves because I almost did, you
Yeah.
know? And I've seen people who really do end up getting pigeonholed and like and end up in a different direction, and don't come out on the other side of things. And
Yeah.
so I'm hoping that I keep pushing barriers and front lines for you guys and that something comes out of this is my
Yeah.
hope.
It will. It will.
Bigger.
It will. I think a lot of people just focus on surviving and think that surviving is just enough, but it's your birthright to want more than that and achieve more than that. So don't just stop at surviving. Why can't you thrive?
Facts.
Yeah, that's all. Well,
So
I thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm eternally grateful.
same. So let the people know where can we find you? Any suggestions? Last minute, last advice for them?
Um, Being fully and truthfully myself, all of my private social networks are for me to still have my ratchet time with my hood friends. And I'm authentic in that I am still 100% a city girl. So that's for that. But if you want to find me for any information about like Hoodoo or about resources for sexual assault survivors and building community that way, you can definitely find me through the Brazen Collective's media handles and websites. So it's Brazen Collective on Instagram, Brazen Co on Twitter. But if you go to our Instagram, we have a linked tree. So if you just search the Brazen Collective, click the link tree, and all of our links will be there on our Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Of
And
course.
I will leave off with letting our listeners know to remember to like, comment, subscribe, and go show some love to Diamond at the Brazen Collective. At the Instagram page, and now that you guys know where to find her, and also um, remember to just provide us with any like
Yeah.
feedback, or because we definitely want to know how to improve and continue these conversations, because they're very much needed. And so thank you for coming on to Mahogany Honey, and don't forget that your soul is golden, girl. Honey, your soul is golden.
That
And
is so
that is a wrap.